Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from every part of the world you are listening in. My name is Ayomide Adenola, the group leader for Group 5 Economics Department, and we're looking at the roles of ethics, moral values, and discipline in promoting national cohesion, social justice, and sustainable development in Nigeria. And I'll be doing a brief introduction to the research topic. Nigeria is one blessed entity full of excellent potentials, but with weak value system. The leadership has not been able to harness the resources to stimulate national development. And if we see that Nigeria possesses vast human capital, rich natural resources, and extraordinary cultural diversity, yet struggle to translate them into unity and development. The gap between Nigerian promise and performance is rooted in fundamental crisis whereby we see shortage of resources also. Most of the things we see happening in Nigeria, most ethical problems we see in Nigeria is due from the foundation and not on the resources of Nigeria.
My name is Monday Okon, and I'll be taking the next slide, which says key definitions. On the key definitions, we have one, which is ethics. From the Greek ethos, which means character. Ethics is the philosophical study of rights, conduct governing individuals and societies. In African context, expressed through Ubuntu, Igumuntu, Igabantu, which means a person is a person through other persons. And we have the second one, which is moral. Moral is shared convictions about right and wrong, honesty, respect, justice, self-discipline. In Yoruba tradition, embodied in the concept of omoluabi, ìwà, which means good character, òtítọ́, truthfulness, sùúrù, self-restraint, and ìtẹríba, which means respect. And we have the third one, which is discipline. The sustained ability to consistently act according to values rather than impulse or self-interest. Its absence produces what sociologist Emile Durkheim called anomie, which means a state of numbness and self-interest replaces shared responsibility. Thank you very much.
My name is Adeyemi Taiwo Korede, and I'll be talking about the conceptual framework of the input and which is the input and the output model. So the input model is the ethnic, moral, and discipline, while the output model is the national cohesion, society, and sustainable development. So this slide is talking about the ethnic, moral value, and discipline. Ethnics help people to know what's right. Moral value promote the honesty and respect, while discipline ensure consistency in doing the right thing. When these values are practiced in society, they produce positive output, which is the natural cohesion, social justice, and sustainable development. In summary, good values and discipline help to create unity, fairness, and long-term national growth. Thank you.
My name is Aliko Famiola, and I'll be taking the next slide on national cohesion. National cohesion means people feeling united as one nation despite differences in ethnicity, religion, or region. In other words, citizens share a common identity and purpose that is stronger than their individualities. For any country to remain united, citizens must trust that the government and the institutions are fair and serve everyone equally. But in Nigeria, that trust has weakened over time because many people believe resources and opportunities are distributed based on political loyalty rather than national interest. What this means is that people no longer fully depend on national institutions for fairness and protection. As a result of this, many citizens fall back on ethnic or regional identities because they feel safer within those groups. A good example is how political appointments or resource allocation are sometimes viewed through ethnic or regional perspectives. So, true national cohesion cannot happen without ethical governance. In other words, unity becomes difficult when citizens believe the system only benefits a few powerful people. National cohesion becomes stronger when institutions are fair, transparent, and protective of every citizen, regardless of background. What this shows is that ethics and good governance are essential for national unity and stability.
Okay, Alima, and I'm talking on social justice. Social justice, according to Ross principle, states that justice to be designed as if no one knew in advance what position they will occupy in society. In other words, laws and institutions should be designed fairly because anyone could end up rich or poor, powerful or powerless. By this standard, many inequalities in Nigeria show structural injustice because some groups benefit greatly while others suffer. What justice demands are equal protection before the law, ethics, ethics as the operating principle of institution, rights for marginalized groups such as rural poor, minorities, and women. And I'll be handing over to the next person.
Section of this slide, we'll also be looking at the sustainable development of how ethics, moral values, and discipline promote sustainable development in Nigeria. If we look at some key statistics that were made through our research, you could see that Nigeria has extracted an estimated 600 billion in oil revenue over 6 decades, yet hospital remains underfunded, unemployment persists, and critical infrastructure lies unbuilt or abandoned. This is not technical failure, it is a moral one. If you could see that most of these are politicians, most of them from the roots of their foundation, from the family units, you could see that there has been some disregard of ethics. You could see some situation in school whereby students speak their native language and they are being fined for it. Most of all of these things congregate into something very um, uniform, that it causes diversity in the aspects of the society. If you also look at the key points we listed, it said Brundtland Commission defined sustainable development meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, fundamentally an ethical obligation. Amartya Sen, which says genuine development is an expansion of human freedom. Nigeria has failed the majority not for the lack of resources but for lack of ethical stewardship. That is, Nigeria is not failing us through their resources, through government or through policy. It is through the ethical stewardship. It is through ethical discipline, through moral values. Most of these things that are supposed to be inculcated in large corporations industrializing in rural communities have abandoned their obligation to promote trust, provide employment, and build cohesion among surrounding population. You can also see that transformation starts from one person, one ethical choice at a time. Citizens cannot wait for the system to change before making ethical decisions in their own sphere of influence. Is the solution for the problems that we're having in Nigeria in ethics, moral value, and discipline. And one of our recommendation is that, if possible, a family orientation could be host in place whereby community level programs running for minimum of 3 years to actively engage parents in moral formation or children. The home is the first and most powerful agent of socialization. That is why this family orientation is going to work perfectly well for the minimum of 3 years. If this can be put in place, we could see that everything will start to change. And one of our second recommendation is the curriculum reform, whereby Nigerian school must formally incorporate indigenous ethical framework, including Omoluabi among Yoruba and Ubuntu philosophy, broadly into their core curriculum, whereby we introduce the Omoluabi 4 recommendation, we could start to see some reforms playing out and causing a change, causing an effect in the society. And I'll also be moving on to the next slide in conclusion of everything of the research that has been done, whereby it says failure to achieve national cohesion, social justice, and sustainable development is not primarily a failure of resources, policy, or government. It is the failure of moral foundations